The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Now I'm ready. It's live.
It's live.
Let's talk about gas station food.
That we literally, I want people to know we had an intense. David Naylor has the definitive list of gas station food. Let's stop before we get started.
Welcome to the Minnesota Soccer Podcast, not the Minnesota gas station.
No, you are listing your top three. The people need to know this.
Oh, fine. In order, based on the deliciousness and affordability of their hot food, Quick Trip, Casey's, and Holiday. Welcome to the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. My name is David Naylor, and I'm the host of the show. Not you, Tom Schreier, or you, Nic Hallett.
This is what the people wanted to know. They're in their cars. They're
not what
hungry.
the people want to know.
They're in their cars. They're hungry.
Now I just keep thinking about. I'm super curious what the show would be like if Tom hosted it and what crazy stuff we'd get into.
Tom needs to host a show that's not about anything, so it can just turn into wherever his mind goes.
No, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, like the Tom's Bill Simmons dream living on. Anyway,
That would be fun.
This show is ideally about soccer, and there was a soccer game played yesterday. We were recording on Monday night, a day after the game, as we usually do, just because of assorted things. So you'll have this on Tuesday morning.
Nic Hallett's fault.
Definitely Nic Hallett's fault.
Thought I was going to get out scot-free on that one.
Absolutely not. Anyway, Minnesota United played a Sunday game for, I think, the first time this year, and it didn't go that badly. Minnesota got a 1-1 draw with Sporting Kansas City, who remained top of the West. I think at the time that increased their lead at the top of the West to 4 points. So even in a home game, a 1-1 draw is a very respectable result against the Sporting side that had scored the most goals in the Western Conference, had a really strong offense, and was very dominant for large portions of that game.
And I mean, just, point there, too. I think didn't Atlanta lose this weekend?
I think so.
So that would leave Casey even larger gap among the entire league, in terms of being in first place.
Yeah, they were among the top two in the league with or without Atlanta's result, and I think they were still behind Atlanta.
Atlanta lost to the Red Bulls.
I saw a crazy stat. Atlanta, didn't they lose? What was the scoreline?
3-1.
It's they lost by multiple goals last week, too. It's the first time in their franchise history that they've lost by multiple goals in back-to-back games.
Can't relate.
Something like that.
No. So the last results for them, they beat Orlando City, but then they had lost to Sporting KC 2-0 the week before that.
Right. So they've lost back-to-back games.
No, it's
they won on the
lose to Sporting, beat Orlando, lose to Red Bulls.
Okay, so it was maybe something about losing by multiple goals twice in a 3-game span or something.
So,
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, Minnesota got that out of the way in their first two games.
But I think I guess I find it from a Minnesota standpoint, I find it interesting because Atlanta's, again, it's so easy. They're the fates of both Uniteds, the two Uniteds coming in at the same time. It's always really interesting to watch the progress, and Atlanta's had all this sexy progress and awesome play on the field, and so it's just really interesting to see that even Atlanta United with all and they've done what so many people want Minnesota United to do and splash the cash. They've done that even twice, 3 times as much as Minnesota, and even they're they've just lost 2 of 3 and by multiple goals each time. I think that's just really interesting.
And the segue that leads me to point out is Nic Hallett. I believe that earlier this week he wrote a piece on Zone Coverage about not necessarily the Atlanta United model, but the Sporting Kansas City model as one that Minnesota should be looking at as a model for their future, which was talked about a lot by a lot of different people this weekend. So do you want to talk about what you wrote in that piece a little bit?
Well, I think it was really inspired by just what Adrian Heath said and how he felt. And Adrian is a very insightful guy in and of himself, and he's gotten to know Peter Vermees on a personal level, worked with him as loaned players or received players on loan from him, and knows the MLS and the American soccer system very well. And that's one of the subtle things about Adrian that I think makes him potentially a really good long-term fit as manager of this club. And he realizes that Sporting KC are a very similar marketplace, very similar financial standpoint. and they've provided a really good model for this organization to try to create. And like I just pointed out, so many people, and you're bringing this up for this reason, so many people want to point to Atlanta United as what they should do. And Heath, counterpoint, right, as I wrote about, can Minnesota be like Sporting KC? And that can be very successful, and a type of success that has now been proven by Vermees and co. to be sustainable over the long haul.
Because that's the thing with Sporting is, like, with Atlanta, you still have a very small sample size. They've been very good and very exciting for a year and 3 months at this point, which is cool, which is great. They built up a great fan base. They've got a good thing going. Sporting built from, I believe their first season was in 2008 or 2009, and they built up year in, have been to the MLS Cup, have won the MLS Cup, and it's been built on Vermees, who has been there the entire time, and his ideals and his vision for the team and his connections and building up the youth system and integrating youth system products into it and integrating his USL team's development into that. And that's the kind of model for a sustainable product that you can put a designated player on top of that, but that's the framework that championship year in, year out teams are built upon. And that's the kind of thing that Minnesota should be looking at, is sustainability.
Yeah, and I would say that as much as like there's criticism of Heath at times, maybe it's coming from us. A lot of times it comes on Twitter after games, right? The public, and that's easy, right? Those are the easy shots to take. But honestly, like from talking and covering Heath as long as I have, and from talking with him, he honestly is a guy who could handle the type of responsibility that someone like Vermees has, and have success with that. I think he has enough acumen and enough intelligence and enough understanding of the U.S. game and enough understanding of football as a whole that he actually could be another Peter Vermees. And I think that's, in MLS standards, there's not many higher compliments.
Yeah,
I don't know that he has that yet, but I'm telling you what I'm saying is I do see that potential in him.
And it's like, assuming he sets up his staff well, assuming he, in addition to just himself, recruits well on a technical staff side as well as on a player side, builds smart relationships. The club as a whole invests in him, invests in a USL side within the next year or two as a development ground for younger players so they can get their own time, maybe in a system similar to what Heath wants, with people that Heath trusts in charge of them. It's the kind of thing, we're going to get the Timberwolves analogy out of the way earlier. It's the kind of thing we looked at with the Timberwolves acquiring a G League franchise this season for the first time, is Tom Thibodeau was able to install his own coaching staff and his own people in charge of that franchise. They were able to develop players that they'd brought to camp, that they'd brought to Summer League, that maybe might never actually play in the NBA, but they're prospects that have things that the team likes that they can develop in a game setting in real time in a system that they could plug and play in a situation, which in the NBA, it doesn't happen as much. But in soccer, we see, especially with the depth issues that Minnesota United is running into, just how valuable it is to have a bigger pool of match-fit, prepared players who know your team's system to be able to call somebody up from the USL and say, we need you on the bench this week because we've had 3 people get hurt and somebody's got to be ready to come on. Boom. I thought a lot about this point on the basketball pod this year, and it's exactly the same point for Minnesota. Like, and it's the injury point, I think, brings it into super clear focus just because things keep piling up. I know we haven't gotten to talk much about this game, but we can start from the end of the game where you have Rasmus Schuler taken off into concussion protocol. I don't know if were you at practice today? Do you have any updates on Schuler's
No, I
condition?
wasn't able to be at practice today.
So I didn't check Twitter that hard today, but I didn't see any updates on Schuler's condition, but he went out with concussion protocol. Bobby Shuttleworth got a stinger on his hand, said he was fine after the game, but it's like it's all of these little things continuing to add up to the Molino and the Finlay and the blows.
And Ibsen out with a quad strain for this game.
Yeah, and this just
Dunlady consistently injured.
Abu Dunladi played in this game.
Yes, absolutely. Ramirez with some hamstring injuries that have really plagued him this season.
So that was one of the things that Heath talked about, is just how much the injuries they're going through are really testing the depth of the squad.
We haven't seen Tyrone Mears in weeks.
Yeah.
Is this typical, or is this way more injuries than you typically see in a first soccer team?
It's like on the above average scale in terms of like, yes, United is experiencing many more injuries than most of the MLS clubs right now, but like you do see it from time to time. From a soccer standpoint, like different clubs this will happen. Like right now, Minnesota United probably has more injuries than most. But you'll see different seasons where, like, next year could be Orlando City, just for whatever reason. Them and KC have, like, more injuries than everyone else for whatever reason.
So Adrian Heath was interviewed today by FSN because it's, like, United Day with the Twins. And it was interesting.
Those are your favorite. Those promos where they combine everyone.
Dude, I wanted to go to that game tonight. The combo scarf for the Twins and United was sick.
Yeah, no, that's my jam. And a few interesting things. He talked about the stadium and how hopefully it'll be their home for the next 60 years, and definitely talked as though he's going to be there for a long time, right? I mean, he was kind of talking as as you would with the head coach, but it seemed like he was planning on being the dude for a while. Trying to remember what your previous point is. This is the classic Tom
injuries.
Blank injuries. I'm thinking of with the Twins specifically. They have like 5 guys out, right? I mean, one guy's suspended, but Maurer injury, Sano coming back from injury, Santana. That is atypical. Where with the Vikings, Dalvin Cook goes out, right? And like they're playing with Keenum as their starting quarterback. It seems like on the scale from football to baseball, soccer sits somewhere in between in terms of how many injuries you have typically and like how much you're kind of expecting with your roster depth.
Yeah, I would say that's a decent representation, and it can lean more towards American football injuries. Yeah, as I've said numerous times on the show as well, soccer is so much harder on the body than many people realize, because
it's like the basketball endurance, right? Kind of the cardio of basketball.
Way more than basketball. Because
it's a larger pitch.
Way more. There's this great chart in like Sports Illustrated once of like how, and you can actually, I think you can just Google it. If you like Google like miles run in professional sports, it like pops up right away, and it's this great chart. And it makes baseball players look like wimps because they run the least,
of course.
And then it makes soccer players look like it's unfathomable because they run more than like the other 4, like basketball, hockey, and basketball and football combined.
I guess hockey's more cuts, right?
And
that's a stat that's tracked. I know that the Premier League has started tracking, like, when a player comes off, you can see, like, what the distance they ran was and the average miles per hour they were running at, which that's the kind of thing, like, it's a form of, like, analytics that might have more to do with, like, player health and fitness than anything else.
Is it tracked like basketball is? Because basketball, they, like, figuring out LeBron takes breaks on offense and stuff like that. They can track how fast he's running or any of the players. Is that common in soccer?
It's not common yet, but I've started to see some of that pop up.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, it'd be super vital information, right?
Yeah.
What's the kind of thing? And there's play analysis like there isn't anything else. Like a guy, you can tell a certain striker tends to cut inside to his left and shoot with his left foot. Name that striker.
On United?
I was thinking of a different point, so I was zoning out of what you were saying. Who cuts in on their left foot?
Cuts in and shoots on the left foot.
Arjen Robben?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you came up with that.
There is a large series of memes about Arjen Robben's preference to cut inside onto his left foot.
Well,
that is wonderful.
But the most baller thing about him is that like everyone knows that.
Everyone knows it, and it still does it.
Do you know like Julio Jones? Do you know this story? The Pats figured out that he probably had an ankle injury because he wasn't cutting off his right foot or something like that.
He's like only cutting to his left.
Yeah,
or something.
And still, even though they played to that, right? Belichick found this in film or something like that. He still had like 210 yards.
Oh, dang. I hadn't heard that. That's a cool story.
Yeah, but that's like Robin's entire career is that, though. Because he's been doing cut inside, shoot with his left at the 18-yard box for like his entire career, and it doesn't matter.
Although there's baseball players that hit in the shift all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's just, it's one of those things that like, so you can analyze tendencies, but like analyzing the physical tools, like I know the NBA started to do this with the more specific tracking of player movement and of where exactly players are on the court, how fast they're moving.
Yeah.
Soccer's doing exactly the same thing, just on a much bigger field.
And you already, the current stats you have, you already know, or I mean, they're tracking a lot of these advanced stuff,
of
right?
Positional stuff. Yeah. Like, that's the thing, because it's pretty easy to drop a pin on a map and say, this is where this pass happened, this is where it went. If you have a guy
who was
like,
out of position.
It's one of those things like you can. The fact that it's starting to get condensed into like a chalkboard form as opposed to like I can go into a highlight and see who was caught out of position on X play or who missed was it the passer's fault or was it the guy didn't cut or was it the guy didn't run onto a through ball. Like you can do that through film, but when you can do it through an app, through a chalkboard, through the closer we can get to data, the more you can draw conclusions out of it, in my opinion.
Well, what would be really cool, and we could potentially do a story on this for zonecoverage.com, is one thing if you ever watch Minnesota United games that's kind of peculiar is the staff or Adrian or I'm not sure exactly who, but they have all the players wear heart rate monitors throughout most games.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's not like unheard of, but it's like a lot of times professional teams would do this at practice, like make sure that guys and when I've been at practice, United players do this as well, wear the heart rate monitors, and it's a certain thing to be like, make sure certain guys are running enough at practice and getting their fitness in, and so I think. What I would imagine, I think the most interesting question about that would be, and would be fun to write about, is do they, because they have them wear them in the games, is how much are they tracking in-game and how much are they making decisions based on that data in-game? Is Heath taking guys off because they're not running as fast as they were or because they've met their 7 miles that they wanted to cap them at?
Is there a similarity with like a pitch limit? Like okay, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, not nearly as like,
hard and fast.
Yeah, not nearly as like institutionalized.
Because it's not as numerical, right? Like,
and it's also not as numerical, but like
it's like minutes, more like minutes in basketball.
Well, it's and it's just more like we know this guy's going through this, or he's this age, so we want to limit his minutes, right?
Or they've had this injury, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's coming back from a hamstring injury. Let's max him out at 3 miles or 50 minutes.
Is that how they measure it? Because
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Would be a really interesting article to write. Would be. If
we could get the data or the information.
Or if they'd be willing to talk
exactly,
about it. And I don't know
it might be an off-season thing or something like that.
Well,
possibly.
That's one of those things that's the kind of thing a team might keep close to their chest because it's like, we're doing this and other teams aren't. Maybe this gives us an advantage. And if we keep it close, they're wearing heart rate monitors, but are you going to ever get the data?
But I think
that's the question.
You know how like in basketball they'll be like, this guy's coming off an injury, he only gets 20 minutes or whatever, and Tibbs notoriously this year, like there was a limit, and he'd be like, no, there's no limit, and we're like, were you told there's a limit? Or do you just not adhere to limits? I wonder when, because I assume soccer is going to have something like this as kind of their analytics evolve,
up,
right?
Yeah.
That you'll figure out, like, okay, this guy's coming off a knee injury or whatever. You can't, we're going to limit how much time he's on the pitch, something like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing that's harder with soccer is you do only have 3 changes at all you can make. You can't take a guy off and put him back on. You're much more limited on having to use your subs appropriately.
All the more reason the data could be that much more valuable.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to make the right choice, both for the game and for your players. So let's backtrack, because that raises a bunch of good points. The first point we talked about was injuries. And I want to start not necessarily with a specific play in the game. You wrote player ratings, which I believe are also up on Zone Coverage today.
Hopefully.
Probably. How did you feel about Colin Martin's start in place of Ibsen?
Well, I mean, it wasn't like he was choosing between Ibsen and Martin necessarily.
Well, it was
ability.
Ibsen was out.
It was because of
Martin had to play.
Yeah. And I think you're alluding to, specifically what I wrote in the report on zonecoverage.com is just that it was so painstakingly obvious the difference between Colin Martin and Ibsen. And I think, embellishing that was the fact that I think Martin had a bad game in addition to that. But Colin Martin will never be Ibsen, like, ever. That's just kind of a fact. But I had felt Martin had played decently up until this point this season, and this was a nice chance for him to be starting from the beginning of a game.
And it was a tough test, too.
Playing against the best team in the league right now. So it's very incredibly tough. And it's a team that its specific strategy in out of possession is to press high up the field, which is going to put a lot of different stressors on players, particularly the center mids.
I like the word stressors.
So
that's a keeper.
Yeah. So Martin, he was poor. He was poor, and that's why he came off. He was the first one to come off. Heath doesn't even like to. He's late to using his subs, and he pulled Martin fairly early in the second half.
And that does lead into the point about the subs, right? Because he pulled Martin for Maximiano,
who was actually worse.
Yes,
So.
and one of the things he talked about after the game is like it's hard to adjust all these strings because of the injuries, both that are currently happening and that have happened. He says like Maximiano's not all the way match fit yet. It's really obvious to see it with his pace more than almost anything else.
He was so bad, though. It was like, dude, like, it almost felt like Heath said that to, like, as, like, a get-out-of-jail-free card for Maximiano.
He just hasn't played that much.
I don't care. Like, he lost, I swear, and this is maybe just my perception, but I swear he lost the ball, like, every time he got it. I don't care. Like, you could be completely, like, out of fitness. There's no reason you can't play 3 minutes of decent soccer, 5 minutes, and he was just out. It was really bad. Like it was stark. Like how bad he was.
So that was the first adjustment, which is partially forced by injuries, partially forced by personnel availability and what you had, and partially perhaps forced by wanting to get Maximiano game time. Even in this setting, like he's got to get up to speed. Even if he plays horribly. He's playing in the game. He's getting up to match fitness and speed so that he can possibly contribute at a better level in a future game. Getting those minutes still matters, even if they were bad.
Sure. Fair point. But it's weird that it's just weird to me that he was so bad. Like that's it just feels weird. Like he's coming from Brazil's top division. He's got to be good. I don't know.
He's also coming off an ACL and hasn't played much soccer.
For sure. So maybe he is just still that far away. And that's possible.
And I'm willing to give him that benefit of the doubt at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be pretty good.
Yeah.
You're not on Fluminense or whatever Brazilian team he was on, like on accident.
So Heath's second sub was another interesting one. Abu Danladi coming on for Gomez and Danladi playing on the wing.
Who's been saying that? Me. I've been saying that they should do that. Tom was like so interested. Like who
has two thumbs?
This guy.
And came late to this podcast. This guy.
Damn it.
I've been saying that it makes tons of sense to try Dunladi there. It's less responsibility. He's a super young guy. He can still get into scoring positions. His top attribute is his speed, which is the best thing you can have as an outside mid. So
and it fit the pace of the game. And it fits what United's attack has been best at, which is using their speed on the counterattack to try and break away and get goals. It was what their best opportunities came from in this game.
And it fits what the roster needs when you have Christian Ramirez and you can't. It's clear that like for this team to be whatever its best is, Ramirez has to be a part of that. Like that's kind of one of the things that's become clear because he just has things that no one else on this team has in terms of abilities at striker. But also given the fact that Finley and Molino are out for the year, like you need speed on the outside, and so he can provide that. So, yeah, it's just what's needed for the roster is like Don Lottie should be trying to be played on the wing. And so it was good to see Heath finally make that call.
And like when you roll out the midfield adjustment then of Don Lottie, Quintero, Ibarra, that's 3 frickin' fast dudes coming at you on the counter. And if they play like
Darwin is
scorching fast.
I didn't I mean I knew he was going to be a good player and he still amazed me how good he's been. That's another thing. It's just like, how fast are you, son? Like, I didn't know he's going to be that fast. He's so fast. Like, speaking of another fun, well, it's not even an article, but it'd be fun to see them race at practice. Like, I don't know who would win. It'd be close. And that's saying a lot because Dunladi's freaking fast.
Yeah. And
can you imagine Hallett orchestrating this? He's like, guys, hold on, stay out. Race.
But I'm like also collecting like bets from everyone else.
yeah. He's like, it's legal. It's legal.
Hey, it's legal now. Yesterday, so it's cool.
So that I thought was an interesting point. It didn't end up like functioning that much just because of how under the cosh United were at the end of the game. But Dunladi had a point in stoppage time where he had a chance.
That's what I was going to say. Like, as much as it didn't have time to flow because the substitutions were late on and SKC was possessing more so, they almost stole all 3 points. And
multiple times. They had the best chances of stoppage time by far.
yes, but that chance you're pointing out, Quintero into Dunlady, like, that was a real chance. And I mean, it just showed like Dunlady's pace and what it can do, because he flew past that back line. Like, he was so open. Like, Darwin.
It was inches between him and the Kansas City keeper getting on.
The only reason that wasn't a goal is because Sporting's keeper, who was MLS Keeper of the Year last year, read that play and saw it was happening. Half the other goalies in the league, like, that's
just
a goal.
get it chipped over him and it's over.
Yeah. So, man, the upside of Dunlady, it's good to see him healthy.
It's good to see him on the field.
It's just fun to watch him play, and so I'm really happy that Adrian's going to try and play.
And he's just another
wide.
tool, right? Like, he's another tool for this offense, which is I continue to say it's the most important thing for them this season. Is the more they can get ticking and the more goals they can score, the better they're going to do.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was talking about too when I was saying, it's clear the best version of Minnesota United involved Ramirez, but I think also potentially the best version of United involves Dunlady. So you don't want to have to be like taking one out to put the other in.
And even if it's just Dunlady's speed off the bench at the 75th minute, that is a huge weapon.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way he was used in this game is a really good recipe for him.
I'd like to see him get like,
system.
But I'd like to see him get like 30, 35 minutes. So come on at the 60-minute mark.
Yep.
That would be better, especially with, Gomez struggling a little bit as of late.
And Gomez just seemed like the way it felt in the first half is that his radar was off a little bit. Just passes were getting hit to the wrong team.
But to me, it's a worrying trend that's where he's really weak, because it's clear dribbling is a strength, being ambitious with crossing and shooting is a strength. I don't know that his link-up play, that might be his biggest weakness.
And to some extent his decision-making, too. Because in each of the last couple of games, he's taken some shots from outside the box that I'm just like, that didn't feel necessary or productive.
Yeah.
Like, it was worse in the Vancouver game, but not Vancouver, San Jose. It was worse in the San Jose game.
Yeah.
Had a moment or two in this game, too. So I liked the idea behind that substitution, and it worked pretty well when they had the opportunities to get out on a break.
It also might work best for Dunlady to be coming off the bench, because then it may hopefully maybe limits his injury risk.
The third sub, which could have gone 3 different directions, and Heath ended up, I think, prepping 3 different guys at various points in the 5 minutes, which I don't know if came across in the TV broadcast, but we in the press box had our eyes on it, because first person that warmed up for that third sub was Carter Manley.
By himself?
Carter Manley, he was almost going to the scorer's card to come in. He was talking to Heath, had the full jersey on, ready to go.
Oh, really?
When Bobby Shuttleworth messed up his hand. And then everybody paused. Manley went right back to the subs, because it's like, is Matt Lampson going to need to come on? Are we going to need to do that? It's probably really good that didn't come on, so Lampson got a little bit ready, and then Shuttleworth got his hand better and was good to go.
Shook it a couple times.
And then
he was fine.
Rasmus Schuler goes into a head-to-head with a Sporting Kansas City player, has to go off for the concussion protocol, and the change that was made is the Woodbury, Minnesota native, hero of the people,
one of us,
Brent Kallman, entering the game, and Francisco Calvo shifting into the defensive midfield.
I know, wasn't that crazy? Something we've been talking
interesting.
about.
Very interesting.
Yep, something we've been talking about for weeks. And you know what was even twice as interesting was that he was freaking good there.
Bingo.
I would be happy to be on this pod and then rip him for like, wow, you suck at that position. Like, you should not play there. Like, wow, I can't even believe I thought you should play there. No, he was fantastic, and it only spoke more to like the narrative we were pushing like earlier this season of like, clearly he's kind of struggling in the back line, but he's super talented. Let's put him somewhere else. It was 10 minutes, and it was like, dude,
I was going to say, we have to limit it a little bit because it's such a small sample size.
Dude, he was walking past people. Like, he's so comfortable there. And something I didn't realize, and they said on the broadcast, is that he played center defensive mid when he played in Costa Rica's top division. So And like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the type of comfortability he immediately showed. Was like, I've played this plenty.
Well,
and so, like, come on.
It wasn't even the offensive side that impressed me so much as when he was unlocked positionally from having to be in the back line, he was everywhere.
Yes.
Like,
he never looks tired. He never looks tired
because he was all over the ball. He was going for passes. He was intercepting, and like Adrian Heath's comment on the going forward was like, I when we shifted to position, I told Francisco we just need to stay compact and stay in position. And then he goes on a mazy run through the midfield and goes past 3 defenders, which is great, but not great for my heart rate.
And so maybe that's one of the reasons he's kept him in the back line, because you really can't be doing that if you're a center back.
Not regularly.
Right. So maybe that's why he keeps him back there.
But
it's so disappointing though, because this narrative doesn't even have time to really come out and flesh out, because he's going to leave and go to the World Cup. So,
but it's one of those things that we talked about in a pod maybe a week or two ago, how one of the reasons this wouldn't happen is because neither Ibsen nor Schuler would or should be replaced. Both of them now have injury concerns.
Yeah.
And that makes this question way more interesting, because if that's where it's going to be, Ibsen might be hurt. Schuler might be in the concussion protocol. Colin Martin didn't look very good this week. Maximiano doesn't look match fit.
Yeah.
That smells a whole lot like Brent Coleman starting and Francisco Calvo playing center defensive mid. It may not happen. Stop it.
As we're talking about the Costa Rican guy. You did drop Coleman, but yeah.
It may not happen. People might be fine. Schuler might be fine and might start next week on Saturday and be okay. But this is the situation in which you could have argued that it made sense before. If there are injuries to one or both of the starting 2 defensive midfielders, it makes way more sense to see what you've got.
What'll be really interesting is, like the scenario you've pointed out, if Schuller's out and Ibsen's still questionable or what have you. And I think Cal will still be around for a few more weeks, maybe at least one more week.
He leaves on June 3rd, so maybe after the reverse fixture in Kansas City, I think would be his last appearance.
Perfect. So actually, I kind of can take back my earlier point of us not getting to see this like pan out. It feels like it's got to have some type of pan out in terms of what he's going to do with Calvo, because not only should he potentially play Calvo in midfield, but Calvo is for sure leaving, and so Coleman. It makes sense to give Coleman time. So, yeah, man. If he doesn't,
Montreal is a great opportunity to see this.
Exactly. It's not like an insane opponent, so it's a good time for that too. If Schuller's out and Ibsen's out and Calvo doesn't play in midfield, he probably never will.
Yeah, and that you can start Martin Maximiano. It's one of those things that
that just sounds like a disaster.
It does just sound like a disaster, but potentially Heath might not want to do it for an entire game. Maybe it's a thing where you start Martin Maximiano and accept that you're subbing Coleman on at like 60 and shifting Calvo up at 60 to let him loose for the last half an hour of the game.
It just seems weird. Because that's something that you would do with offensive stuff. To do that defensively is that's just so peculiar. I see what you're saying. Like, there's sense in it, I'm kind of bullish that he'll play Calvo in the midfield. But if he doesn't, and both Schuler and Ibsen are out, I don't think he will.
Think it makes sense. But But I
think he should. I think Calvo should play in the midfield.
And obviously, it really does depend on what Ibsen and Schuler's conditions are, because if the two of them are healthy, they start.
And also, why the frick not? Especially because you're being pushed into this situation because of injuries. But what if this makes them awesome? What if they win the next 2 games and Calvo's awesome in that position, and it makes the team click on a level that he hadn't anticipated?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you try it? It's not like you're in first place in the West or something, or high up. It's like, why not?
I think the door is way more open to it than it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I find that very interesting.
Well, it's the fact that it's even open is good, because 4 weeks ago I asked him point blank, and he said he would never.
Yep.
So it's a lot more open now than it was then.
So while we're on Calvo, Kansas City's goal, Calvo's fault?
It was.
Or just Kerry Shelton being really freaking big?
Yeah, timing is jumped to perfection, and I mean,
Shelton is bigger than Calvo is. Like, he's losing the size matchup on that.
Yeah, and it was a great ball in, and all those factors. It's hard not to notice. I don't think you can really take Calvo to task fully, but it is impossible, at least again from my perspective, not to notice that it's Calvo's mark who scores.
Well, and it's been a thing that Heath's brought up before this. It was actually the Vancouver matchup when it's brought up first. Is this center back pairing is not the biggest of guys. And when you're up against teams that have really big strikers, it's another point for Brent Coleman, who is a bigger dude.
Is he? I mean, is he that much bigger? I don't know that he's that much bigger than those guys. I mean, I feel like he's the same size as Boxall, for sure.
Fair enough.
He's not a giant, so...
But it's one of those things that, like, that's just a physical matchup that Calvo loses. And perfect ball... perfect run.
Well, he lost. He lost a header 2 weeks ago to a guy who's 5'3".
Yeah, this was not that.
This was definitely the opposite of that. But
so it was one of those things. Heath talked about it in the goal. I wrote about Heath's comments on this in my recap of the game, also on zonecoverage.com. Basically said sometimes you got to tip your hat to a goal. Like there's always things you can do better. But sometimes they just get you on a set piece like that.
True, and I'm like everyone knows, I would be candid and rip Calvo if he was really at fault.
Yeah,
he's partially at fault.
He's partially at fault, but Sporting played that right.
Yeah, it wasn't like an embarrassment.
Now, if we're talking about embarrassments and 5-3 guys winning headers, let's talk about Minnesota United's goal.
Yeah, 5-5 guys winning headers.
Yeah, 5-5 Darwin Quintero wide open in the box gets a header on frame.
Sumptuous ball from Mr. Ibarra.
Beautiful ball from Miguel Ibarra. And
sumptuous.
2017 MLS Keeper of the Year doesn't hold the header.
I mean, but heading is such an interesting one. It's another one of those, like, from like an outside perspective, like it always like. Headers can sometimes look slow in live action or replays, and it's
one was a bullet.
And it's like, dude, how do you not get to that? But like, it can look slow, but like the reaction needed for how close headers usually take place,
and that one was within the 6-yard
fast.
box.
It's so fast, and it was a good header from Darwin, and he was super close. The fact that he didn't hold that, he'll be frustrated, and he clearly was that he didn't hold it, the keeper, but. Honestly, it's so much like headers are just like if a keep can save it, great, but it's a bonus a lot of times.
Yeah, and it was a good reactionary second hit by Darwin to finish it.
Yeah.
Like
Seriously, it was.
Just got enough of a foot on the rebound and then put it in, and that's what you pay for.
Yeah, no, that dude's so calm. Like, it looks like nothing, but even just getting his thigh onto that is a really good play.
Yeah, and that was like it was interesting, like how that rotated into the game flow, because Sporting had most of the ball and had even more of the ball after halftime, and were playing in possession very well, and were like they clearly are comfortable playing with the ball and looking for openings that way and working opportunities through that. What was interesting about it is, especially in the first half, that plays into Minnesota United's hands pretty well, too, because they had openings on the counterattack, and they were getting in behind Sporting Kansas City's back line multiple times.
Well, and combining that with the Ibarra, like talking about the goal, like how about Ibarra again creating another big assist, which is he's shown a great trend of recently, which has been huge for this team. So kudos to Ibarra in the season he continues to have. But how about I don't know if you recall it, but the offsides call on Ibarra
a minute before.
Was it?
It was the exact previous run up was a minute before he got caught. He got caught. I mean, we might be thinking
the one that went in where he could have played it across to Ramirez, and it was a tap in. Yeah, I mean I thought he was on sides.
That was the one right before Kansas City scored. Yeah,
I thought he was on sides for that, and he would have definitely created a goal out of that. So, I mean, the kid continues to play well and really get in the right spots.
Ibarra had like 3 or 4 theoretical chances created within the first 20 minutes of that game, the last one being the goal. Because it was a minute before Minnesota scored, he'd had another chance in exactly the same place and mishit the cross with just as many openings to him. And a minute later, he gets in and gets the goal from the same angle from the right wing. Like, that was working. And it was interesting that Kansas City had to make a sub. I heard it said it was because of injury. It didn't seem like it was because of injury that they subbed Jimmy Medranda off for Sesinovic in like the 30th minute. That's Ibarra's guy. Like, that was Ibarra's guy, and Medranda was getting burnt by Ibarra like every single time. Sinovic comes on, Ibarra isn't nearly as big of a factor in it, which is an interesting point, but it's also, if it was an injury, fair enough, but if it wasn't, you forced an opposing team to make a first-half sub because your guy was getting burnt so badly.
Yeah, it's a really good point. No, they said on the broadcast they thought it was because it was a poor performance, so... Yeah, no, it didn't seem like an injury. So
it's Ibarra's guy.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's on really good form, and yeah, that's one of the best compliments you can get in soccer. Is you're burning your guy so bad you take him off in the first half. Yikes!
That doesn't happen. Like, that is not a thing that happens in.
That's
any league.
Honestly relatively equatable to getting your ankles broken on a crossover in the NBA. Like. It's that level. That's pretty dope.
Not getting your ankles broken, but getting your ankles broken, falling over backwards, and sliding backwards on the ground.
Yeah,
like
true.
It's not just a basic
ankle break.
It's not just the basic ankle break. It's the full embarrassment.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. It's just crazy to think Darwin is clearly gonna do his thing, and it's just crazy to think Miguel's on good form. If Ramirez can I don't know why he can't, but find some way to get going, that it's really intriguing what this team can be capable of.
I asked Heath about the chemistry between Ramirez and the three attacking midfielders after the game because I was interested in what he would say. And his response was like, if you look at the first half, it's coming. Like, we got what we wanted in the first half from the attacking four. We got the openings that we were looking for. We were in the positions to draw their fullbacks in, get out on the flanks, and attack with crosses into the middle. And the positional understanding between Darwin and Ramirez, but between all four of them, it's coming. Darwin talked about it, too, in his comments after the game. He spoke to media through Jessica Lopez translating and said, we're learning, we're figuring this out, and it's only going to get better. So I hope that's the case. It's coming for Ramirez. I believe that.
The only concern is it's easy to say those things, but you also would imagine it is. And Darwin's still so new to the team, and Ramirez for whatever reason has really. You can't tell exactly if it's been health or form or what have you for him to get going, but yeah, no, it's there. Like we talked about last week, the signs are there, and it's really interesting.
Ramirez was one of the ones that I didn't think dealt that well with the press once Kansas City started pressing the ball really hard. He just couldn't keep the ball if it came to him. That looked pretty obvious in the last 10 minutes of the first half to me.
Well, I think it was tough because sometimes his support runs it was really late for those guys to get up to him. Because he can be good, but he needs someone to dish off to because he's not fast enough to run away.
He could not get away from guys.
And that's one of the big knocks on him. But if he has people around him, he will get the ball out to them. But
it didn't seem like a game that set up very well for him. That I like the chance early. He was right place, right time. If that call hadn't been offsides, that is a goal.
Also, I didn't think that was that. I could have seen that being onside, kind of.
Yeah.
The goal that went in for him. So
yeah, he absolutely could have had a goal in this game. There were a couple of offsides calls that were real airline.
Yeah, they were. They really were. But I think Ramirez. You point out Ramirez there, and I felt like many people were taken down a notch because of Ibson's absence. Because of the press was so suffocating and clearly a strain on everyone at times that Ibson was really sorely missed in those situations.
You just need a guy who can escape, right?
You need a guy who knows how to possess in multiple ways, and Ibson can do that. He can possess by distributing or winning the ball or getting a foul and allowing his team to push up. So he can possess in a myriad of ways, and that was really missed on the day.
Yep, it would have helped, just the ability to draw fouls, which we joke about Ibson being on the ground.
It's hilarious. It is.
But it really just does help break up some pressure if you can draw that foul.
And if we can be serious for a moment about those situations, as much as it can very much look comical, what's also he is doing, though, that is exceptional, is that he sets up in a way that people feel the need to foul him.
Yeah.
So yes, he makes it look funny in the end because he gets, but he is doing a really good job of setting himself up to get fouled. So it is a skill. And it's not his fault that they're fouling him. He just looks silly because he embellishes it a little bit each time, but he's doing good stuff in those moments. A lot of times. Sometimes it's ridiculous. But.
Yep. Who was your man of the match? If you had to pick a man of the match from Minnesota United.
Oh, it's got to be Bobby Shuttleworth. And
who we haven't talked about yet. That's kind of why I wanted to bring it up.
And leads your player grades.
Yes.
At least in the title.
Yes, he does. And one of the biggest compliments I can give him is just like, you've got the best team in MLS, shellacking and coming down on your goal constantly. And you honestly you never feel like overly concerned about it because Shuttleworth's there. And you know that, yes, they could score, but it's going to take a really good effort for it to happen. If you put on an 8 out of 10 strikeout goal, he's going to save that. It's got to be 9 or 10 out of 10 quality to beat Bobby at the form he's in right now. And man, that's amazing. And man, that speaks to his quality. I mean, Heath's got to be ecstatic to have that. I think it started to permeate confidence throughout the defense, and I think that's why you've seen the defense play better at times this season. And it also says to me that, without question, Shuttleworth is now in the top 3 of most valuable people on this team.
Where are you on Shuttleworth's distribution after he has possession of the ball? Because that was one area that I thought you could be critical of in this game, is that sometimes he got his defenders into bad positions with the press by choosing to go short with a ball when there was a striker right there, or choosing to go long. And sometimes United weren't able to hold the ball because his longer passes weren't as accurate. That was my one criticism for Shuttleworth. He was amazing at being a goalie, which is the key factor. And
like 95% of his jobs. No, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going
to... That's a thing I think that he can get better at. Like, he is amazing. He does superhuman things on a nearly weekly basis. But there are elements of his game that can get better, and I think some that could have made United able to breathe a little bit more in this game if they'd been able to hold onto the ball a little bit more with his help.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's being super nitpicky. But
I think it is, and I also think it's that KC press made good midfielders and other outfield players struggle. Yeah. Imagine what it's going to do to a goalkeeper. Yeah. You know, at times having to play the ball with his feet. So yeah, it's hard to be critical.
Yep. It's just a thing. Like I want to. That's the thing I want to keep an eye on with Shuttleworth is what that looks like game to game to game.
Not everyone can be David De Gea. You know what I mean?
I'm curious about it.
There's only one.
I'm curious about it. It's just a little thing.
Yeah.
Montreal on Saturday. I have not done any research about Montreal. I'm not going to lie on the air. And I still don't have a laptop, so I can't pull anything up real quickly. They're in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
Tom, how do you feel about this result?
About this matchup?
Yeah, about this matchup.
Oh, I'm excited.
What's your insight?
I'm excited. Montreal's not very good, are they? I'm looking all this up as we talk.
Yeah, you're right. I'm going to do the same thing.
What do we know about Montreal here?
At least you guys are trying. I'm not.
Yeah, none of us prepared. This was probably not our finest.
Well, I mean, honestly though, like, let's not get too overwhelmed about it. Like, what are we? There's not much to. Montreal's a mid-table side.
Montreal is second to last in the Eastern Conference with the worst goal difference in MLS.
Okay, so even worse. They're just worse than you would have even anticipated.
This is in Montreal, right?
No, it's here.
Oh, it's here.
It's here. This is
a game they got to win.
This is the last.
Well, we've seen how that goes.
We've seen that movie. Yeah. This is the last game of the end of April into May homestand where they have 5 of 6 games at home.
Yeah,
and this was the last point that I made in my recap of this week, and that Adrian Heath made for me, I didn't even have to ask this question, which I appreciated, is that they've talked about internally, and I've suggested that where they sit at the end of this homestand is going to give them a pretty good idea of their expectations going into the rest of the season. As they sit right now, Minnesota is 8th in the Western Conference. tied with Los Angeles Galaxy and Real Salt Lake on 13 points.
Adrian Heath said he liked it, maybe not liked his playoff chances, but threw out that as a possibility if they kind of get on a roll.
It honestly feels a little bit like it, but man, it's just so hard when you're going to be without Molino, Finley, you've got other injury concerns, and then now Calvin's going to be gone for the World Cup. If you had all their pieces, I would feel,
which is a credit to them.
True.
Yeah.
For sure it is. But it's tough.
But it's one of those things that if they go in, if they leave this homestand with 16 points, which they would if they win this game, and that leaves the door open that they could be sitting as high as 5th in the Western Conference, depending on other results.
And I think they've been as high as 4th at different times.
They've been as high as 4th at different times. But it's like it is not outside of their own possibility that at the close of this homestand, they do sit in the playoff position of the Western Conference. And at the very minimum, they're within 3 or 4 points and recovering their goal difference and doing okay.
Yeah.
Which that's like...
all things considered.
It's progress. And yeah, like you look at... now that I'm looking at a few stats on Montreal have given up more goals than any other team in MLS. They have given up 27 goals in 12 matches this year.
Honestly, we talked about how much like the San Jose game was perfect, like a must-win. Like they're at home against the worst team in the league. Like what a great setup. Honestly, this is like exactly that too, because we've talked about one of the biggest jump-off points for this team could be if the offense can get going. What better opponent than the team that's allowed the most goals?
Yeah, like this.
It's at home. I'm very bullish that the Loons will win this game. And what I would say, I would go as far as to say, as long as barring something like ridiculous doesn't happen, Ramirez breaks his leg, 3 minutes in, Ibsen gets sent off with a red card halfway through the first half. Is barring like crazy stuff happening, I would be very, very bullish that they're going to win this game.
Having watched very little of Montreal this year, I am interested to see how Minnesota do when they have more of the ball. Because I assume that in this game they're going to have more possession than they have in like their last 3 previous games, where they've been kind of under the gun a little bit and have been playing on the counter, which they preferred to do. We think back to like say the Atlanta game where they were up a man, had like 80% possession in the second half and didn't find a way through. It hasn't seemed like playing from possession has been this team's strongest suit this year. Might be the position that they find themselves in this year and in this game, and I want to see if there are improvements in that side of their game, which we really didn't get to see in the Kansas City game at all because they weren't allowed to play in possession.
Yeah, that's why I think this game is going to be so fun. It's like so interesting, and why I'm so bullish that they're going to do well, because they're going to be feeling a little bit like that too. Like, okay, finally we can kind of like do our thing a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I would expect to see the team assert themselves in the first half of this game, and hopefully that means no early goals, which has continued to be their bugaboo. They did it again this past week. Like within 10 minutes, first goal goes in for the opposing team, and it's Miguel Ibarra said after the game, "We've got to stop playing from behind." Like they have proved they can do it, and they have come back from deficits this year. But you don't need to do that.
Right.
Like it's just that. So that would be what I would be looking for from this game: is don't allow an early goal and assert themselves in. Even if it doesn't result in a goal, assert yourself in possession. Be the home team, be the better team, and show it.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I would even count, like, if they, like, allowed 2 early goals because they just do some, like, outrageous poor defending, that counts as crazy thing happening.
Rasmus Schuller allows a penalty in the first minute.
Right. Because he's still concussed. No, I think, like I said, I'd be very bullish that they're going to win this game.
I'm with it. So we got a couple extra minutes to go. Champions League final, which I believe is this weekend. This coming weekend should be played before we record our next podcast.
Yep.
Liverpool and Real Madrid. Do you believe in the upset?
I believe it could happen. Though. Madrid is so good. They've, like, first team ever to win, like, back-to-back Champions Leagues, like, be, like, super crazy to win 3 out of 4 or whatever it is. And also a really, like, crazy stat is, like, literally if you count the Europa League finals and the Champions League finals the last, like, 8 years, like, or actually it's even more, it's, like, the last 12 years.
It's some ridiculous stat.
11 of the 12 winners have been Spanish clubs. And the only one in the last, like, whatever time period that was Manchester United. And that was last year winning the Europa League, which is not even that great of a competition necessarily. So Spanish teams are obviously dominant right now when it comes to cup competitions. So and then Madrid's the best Spanish team. So I don't know. And they're the defending Champions League winners. So it's as much as it's like it's kind of it's not like a crazy underdog story. In some ways, it is.
It is more than you feel like it should be in this matchup.
In a Champions League final.
Liverpool getting to the Champions League final is an incredible achievement considering what their squad went through in the first half of this season and how much they had to figure out in the league. I think they finished fourth in the league this season. They never really got to 100% in the league, but the run that they've made to get to this point has been remarkable.
Well, the thing is, it absolutely has. I can picture Mohamed Salah and Firmino and Mane winning the Champions League. What I can't picture is Dejan Lovren winning the Champions League, and Loris Karius and Virgil van Dijk. That's what's hard to picture, is those guys hoisting the trophy. My mind can totally picture Salah and Firmino holding it. I can't picture Lovren, man. I don't know how Madrid doesn't beat Dejan Lovren.
Yeah, that's going to be the thing is Liverpool is going to be relying on scoring goals, and you have to feel Salah can get at least one in this game. But their defense is going to have to be better than it's been in any single game this year to win them this trophy.
You would think. You would think.
Yeah, I would be shocked. If this turns into a score fest, but Liverpool can win those games, but...
Yeah, and maybe that's actually how they do it, though. Maybe that's how it ends, and which would make for a great final. But maybe that's what happens. They win a 4-3 game.
Well, but we've seen with so many of these cup finals and final games is they tend to be played more within themselves, even when teams are more attacking and out there than we would expect. In my opinion, teams play more carefully in these games because they don't want to make the big mistake.
But Liverpool their system sets up for those things, though. They set up to make mistakes, which is great. They they press, so they look to make the other team make the mistake possession-wise, which Madrid will try to do. And then they want to counter aggressively, and Madrid will want to possess. So it actually can kind of, in some ways, set up really well. And from a tactician standpoint, I'd definitely take Klopp over Zidane.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. It's an interesting point. If Klopp can find something to exploit just within matchups or within a substitution or something.
Yeah, he's proven as a tactician. Zidane is kind of not necessarily.
Zidane got a really nice club job for his first managerial stint.
Right, at the best club in the world.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
good for him. I want that job.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
I'd give it to Tom, though. I think Tom's...
I got this.
Tom Schreier, the next Barcelona manager.
I'll start with Montreal. Turn around.
Actually, no. Arsenal should have hired you instead of Unai Emery.
Yeah, no, I was in consideration, but it was a big move. I like it here.
So, and as Nick alluded to, the Europa League final was played this week. Atletico Madrid did win that. So both...
Another Spanish team,
and that's after Sevilla won it, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row.
Well, Man U won it last year.
Man U won it, but before that, it was Sevilla's trophy.
Yeah, true.
So it is do you think the Spanish league is the best league in world football?
I think it has the two best teams in world football, but I don't think I think the Premier League is a more robust and comprehensive league. I think the Spanish league, when you have Madrid and Barcelona, that's the differentiator, is those two. And I think Atletico, Madrid, and Sevilla have been battle-hardened because they have to go against those guys. And so that's maybe what gives them the steely reserve to handle cup competition so well. That would be my guess, because it is. I think the more interesting question. I think that's a fun topic and it's a good question. But I think the more interesting question is what has allowed Sevilla and Atletico Madrid to be so good as well. And one of the only things you can point to is that they have to compete against Madrid and Barcelona regularly. But I don't know.
Well, and it's the inverse of the question is why has the Premier League failed so much in the Champions League in years past, with Liverpool's getting to the championship in this season being an aberration compared to recent years' failures in the group stages, in the quarterfinals, in the round of 16.
It's
the reverse of the question. The Spanish teams have been so good, and the English teams have typically been really bad.
Well, it's just tough because the English teams are constantly made weaker by the Spanish teams. Madrid takes Ronaldo from Manchester United. Barcelona takes Suarez from Liverpool, takes Coutinho from Liverpool. Like, those guys are the type of guys you would need to beat them, and then they keep getting plucked. Gareth Bale taken from Tottenham. Like, all their if those guys were all still in England, it's a different conversation completely. So it's hard when the Spanish giants are able to, weaken the English guys.
But then there's Manchester City.
They haven't had that team's only been that team's still so new that they just they don't know how to handle European nights
because
they just don't.
They're on that level financially. They
Yes.
buy whoever they want,
and they have a
get the
manager
players they
who is
want.
certainly at that level.
Yeah,
So-
proven, tested, European winner.
But European nights are like a different echelon, and they showed that they've passed certain tests and keep moving up. But to be a soccer power takes decades. Like Sevilla, a team no one would talk about, right? We're only talking about them because this is a soccer podcast. We know soccer very well. Sevilla is not a team in the mouths of clubs that they would talk about.
I don't see Sevilla jerseys at school.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So my point being, Sevilla has been a successful club a heck of a lot longer than Manchester City has.
Correct.
So that they have that experience, and for whatever reason, right? It's one of those things where it's it doesn't make sense because it's the fact that Sevilla was a successful club 15 years ago shouldn't, in theory, necessarily. It's not going to. How does that affect the 11 guys who weren't even around in this day and age? But for whatever reason, it feels like in soccer it does, and so Manchester City, for whatever reason, they haven't reached that echelon
Because
yet.
that's the question with Manchester City is
Leicester City won the Premier League and immediately bounced from the Champions League, immediately not back in playoff in contention at all.
Leicester made it to the round of 16.
Yeah, but they were bounced by Sevilla, actually, I believe. Funnily enough. But I'm just pointing out that you can win the Prem, and that doesn't mean you're competing for Europe, which is my larger point.
All I'm saying is Leicester did better in the Champions League group stages than Arsenal ever do.
Sounds like you just want to take a shot at some Arsenal jabroni out there.
Yeah, all of them. Most of them, all of them. I have to throw the shade, and I also Leicester City. You commented on this. Leicester City's a bigger deal than the Vegas Golden Knights. Explain.
Oh my gosh!
Nic Hallett tweeted about this. Nic Hallett on Twitter
at Prince Hallett. They. How do I explain this? You're hitting me with that's funny because you just hit me with 3 back-to-back really big picture questions that there could be
Fine, I'll take
there
my
could
own
be
question.
Books explaining them.
Leicester, Vegas went from a team that didn't exist to being able, through the rules of the NHL expansion, to purchase and trade for some of the best players in the league. Not the number one players, not no Ovechkin, not a Crosby, but quality guys, a quality goalie in Marc-Andre Fleury, and you've got this team of establishment. Leicester, 6 years ago from now, they were in the championship, losing in the playoffs of the championship to Watford on a Troy Deeney breakaway goal in the end of that. They went from barely making it out of the championship to winning the Premier League with very few changes to their squad.
Well, and the Vegas Golden Knights play in the NHL, which is a league that doesn't have dominant forces. It has teams that can be very good for a few years here and there, but it's not the hegemony that is the Premier League, where Manchester United has been dominant for 60 years. You couldn't talk about an NHL team being that. Even the Montreal Canadiens, how good were they? Good for 20? Were they good for 20 years in the 50s or whatever it was, 60s, 70s? That 20 years. Manchester United have been around. Arsenal's been around and been dominant for multiple decades, numerous decades.
Underdogs do not win the Premier League.
And not only that, but they've used that past dominance to amass massive financial gain and a financial advantage that they use on a yearly basis against all these smaller teams. And so you have, and then Manchester United is just one example, you have Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool, all Manchester City, all clubs that are operating on that plane, and they had to usurp all of them to do that with it's just incredible. It's so different than being good in the NHL. And the NHL is a system, it's a playoff system where it's if you get hot, you keep playing, you knock out one team at a time. Leicester had to be the best team over the course of the entire season and finish with the most points, i.e. essentially the best record. That's incredible.
With a roster of like players that no one had rated.
Exactly.
Like, they had basically no players entering that season. Most analysts had them slated to go back down in the championship, 18th, 19th, or 20th in the table in preseason predictions almost across the board. The season they won the league. And Vegas had some similar things, but no one thought they would be
so
that bad.
It'd be as if like the NBA expanded to Seattle or Vegas, and then that team
beat the Warriors and the Rockets on its way to the finals against the Cavs, and then beat the Cavs, or something to that effect. That is a better comparison
because the NBA does have like 5 or 6 teams that like it's hard to win the title as an upset in the NBA.
Yeah,
as a general rule, it kind of doesn't happen.
Or it's nearly impossible.
No, Warriors over Dallas.
What's the last upset?
Dallas Mavericks in 2011.
Taking down, who was it? The Heat.
The Heat. It was the first year of LeBron in Miami.
Yeah, that just like, and what was the one before that? Right, it was
probably Detroit in 2003 or 4.
Exactly. It only it only happens every 15 years. Otherwise, it's all dynasties.
Yeah, like and that's the kind of thing like that in the Premier League. Before Leicester, it was like when Blackburn won the Premier League in 1995 or 6.
And I bet those Pistons and Mavericks teams weren't slated to finish dead last in the NBA. They were slated to be like playoff teams probably.
Yeah.
You know, Dirk and then Rich Hamilton and all those guys. Like those were decent teams. Leicester, as you pointed out, were supposed to be dead last or around there.
So you've probably turned this podcast off right now, and if you haven't, we're preaching to the choir because you're listening to a soccer podcast. But wanted to get that point out there because everybody loves the Vegas Golden Knights right now. Go do some reading on Leicester City if you haven't.
I mean, no one in Canada likes the Vegas Golden Knights, but they're a team of destiny, man.
Yep. So that's there. We've tied in like every other professional sport, as is our trademark on this podcast.
Let's just hit the royal wedding and let's get out of here.
Man United is Meghan Markle in this situation. Prince Harry is Arsenal.
Nice. That's a good one.
David Beckham's outfit at that wedding is Manchester City.
Dude, he was looking fresh.
Dapper. Just, it's unfair. I'm so angry. So I'm going to wrap it up. Yep. This is a podcast. This was the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. Minnesota United play Montreal Saturday evening. Got the nighttime game this week. Saturday night, 7 o'clock p.m., TCF Bank Stadium. I will be there. Nic Hallett will be there. We got the squad at the game.
Wave at us.
Yep, we'll be in the press box.
Nick will be here 8:30 sharp Sunday night.
So it's funny because I won't.
Oh, God. What?
I'm in town next weekend. I told you.
Let's talk about this off air. That's not.
Yeah, Tom needs to stop trying to do his Google Calendar on air during podcasts.
Sneaky Pete's, 1 a.m.
No, I do not want Sneaky Pete's to be affiliated with anything I do.
Listen to the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. Read all of our work on zonecoverage.com. Subscribe to our membership program. You get awesome stuff. You get all of our content. You get access to us. You get Tom Schreier's Google Calendar invites to Sneaky Pete's at 1 a.m. That should be included. All right. I'm David Naylor.
Quick trip in Plymouth.
I'm David Naylor.
It's the Manchester City of this situation.
This is off the rails. I'm David Naylor at Prop Cedar, Nic Hallett at Prince Hallett, Tom Schreier at T Schreier 3. Let's get out of here. Minnesota Soccer Podcast out.